cars contribute to the wear and tear on our roads. I will ensure that drivers are taxed according to how much they drive and not just by the type of car they own, by introducing the electric vehicle excise duty on electric cars. This will be payable each year alongside vehicle excise duty at 3p per mile for electric cars and 1.5p for plug-in hybrids, helping us to double road maintenance funding in England over the course of this Parliament. And alongside this, I am providing support to boost our British car industry, increasing the threshold for the expensive car supplement on electric vehicles to £50,000, saving over 1 million motorists £440 a year, providing £1.3 billion additional funding for the electric car grant.
Right, so let me get this straight. The government spends years telling us we're all planet-destroying monsters if we don't switch to electric cars, dangles incentives like carrots in front of very confused donkeys, sets a deadline to ban new petrol and diesel sales by 2030, and now, literally now, Rachel Reeves decides to slap a pay-per-mile tax on electric vehicles that makes going green feel more like going broke. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. It's like finally convincing someone to join the gym, watching them buy the membership, the trainers, the protein shakes, and then charging them extra every time they actually show up to work out. Make it make sense, Chancellor. I'll wait. Today, we're diving into Rachel Reeves' latest masterstroke, convincing drivers to abandon electric vehicles faster than you can say range anxiety. If you're new here and you enjoy watching me lose my mind over policy decisions that make about as much sense as a chocolate teapot, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell because, trust me, British politics never disappoints in the disappointment department. So, here's what's happening. Rachel Reeves, in all her infinite wisdom as Chancellor, has announced a brand new pay-per-mile charge for electric vehicles starting in April 2028. And before you think, oh, that's ages away, let me remind you that 2028 is basically tomorrow in government implementation time. We'll blink, it'll be 2027, they'll still be arguing about the details, and suddenly it's April 2028, and your Nissan Leaf is costing you more to run than your Nan's ancient diesel Corsa. The numbers? 3 pence per mile for fully electric vehicles and 1.5 pence for plug-in hybrids. Now, I know what you're thinking. 3 pence doesn't sound like much, does it? It's barely the cost of those sad-looking penny sweets at the corner shop. But here's the kicker. If you're an average driver doing about 8,500 miles a year, you're looking at roughly 255 quid annually. And that figure? Oh, it's going up every year with inflation. Because, of course it is. Nothing says encouraging green transportation quite like an inflation-linked progressive tax system, does it? This delightful little revenue generator is expected to bring in £1.4 billion by 2029 as part of a broader tax package aimed at raising £11 billion. That's billion with a B, £11 billion. At this point, I'm half convinced that Treasury has a dartboard with different taxation ideas on it, and Reeves just closes her eyes and throws. But here's where it gets properly mental. EVA England, that's the Electric Vehicle Drivers Association for those playing along at home, has absolutely torn into this plan. And honestly, I don't blame them one bit. Their CEO, Vicky Edmonds, came out swinging, saying this tax is like putting the brakes on any momentum toward getting more drivers to switch to electric. And she's spot on, isn't she? It's literally the policy equivalent of telling someone to run a marathon and then tying their shoelaces together at the starting line. Think about the timing here for a second. Electric vehicles currently make up just 5% of cars on UK roads. 5%. We're not even at 10% yet. We're nowhere near critical mass. We're barely past the early adopter phase. Most people still think electric cars are those weird milk floats their granddad used to see at dawn. And yet here we are, taxing the life out of them before they've even had a chance to become mainstream. It's like taxing smartphones in 2008 and wondering why everyone's still using Nokia bricks. Now, let's talk about the charging divide, because this is where the whole thing goes from questionable policy decision to actually quite cruel.
EVA England has revealed that half of EV owners without driveways are already spending more on running their electric vehicles than they would on petrol or diesel. Let that sink in. These people made the switch, believed in the vision, bought into the green dream, and they're actively losing money because they can't charge at home. They're dependent on public charging infrastructure, which costs an absolute fortune compared to plugging in overnight at a cheap tariff. And here's the really depressing stat. Households without driveways make up fewer than 10% of current EV drivers, but represent nearly 40% of all UK drivers. That's a massive chunk of the population who are already priced out of the supposed benefits of going electric. They're the ones who would benefit most from lower running costs, and instead they're getting absolutely shafted. And now Reeves wants to add a mileage tax on top. It's like watching someone drown and throwing them an anvil instead of a life ring. The perception problem is real too. 40% of motorists believe electric vehicles will never suit their needs. 40%. And you know what reinforces that belief faster than anything else? Extra taxation. Nothing screams, "This isn't for you," quite like the government making it more expensive before most people have even considered switching. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy wrapped in a policy document tied with a bow of poor timing. EVA England is now pushing back hard, demanding that the government actually listen to drivers, instead of just steamrolling ahead with plans that sound good in a Treasury spreadsheet but fall apart in the real world. They want the £1.3 billion electric car grant to actually help lower-income households access EVs and strengthen the second-hand market, because, surprise, surprise, not everyone can afford a brand-new Tesla. They're calling for benefit-in-kind rates to be extended past 2030 and into the used car sector, which honestly seems like the bare minimum if we're serious about mass adoption. And then there's the public charging review. EVA England wants swift progress on reducing public charging costs, which is absolutely critical for those without home charging, because right now public charging is expensive enough to weep into your reusable coffee cup. Adding a mileage tax on top is just rubbing salt into an already gaping wound.
Vicky Edmonds confirmed they'll be taking these points into ongoing discussions with HM Treasury and the Department for Transport in the coming weeks. I genuinely hope those meetings involve someone in government having a proper light bulb moment, because at present this policy has all the strategic foresight of a chocolate fireguard. Now, to be fair, the budget did include some investment in EV infrastructure. There's money for charging stations and enhancements to the electric car grant. But here's the thing, that's like building a swimming pool and then charging people extra for getting wet. You can't encourage adoption with one hand and punish it with the other and expect people to just roll with it. Industry figures are echoing these concerns loud and clear. Asif Ghafoor, CEO of charge point operator B.EV, called the mileage-based system a new hurdle to adoption for millions of motorists. He's highlighting what we already know. There's a massive inequality between drivers with driveways who can charge cheaply overnight and those stuck using expensive public chargers. And this tax just widens that gap even further. John Cassidy from Close Brothers Motor Finance warned that the scheme could make EV ownership substantially more expensive than traditional alternatives, especially for high-mileage drivers. And he's absolutely right. If you're doing serious miles for work, commuting long distances, or just living in rural areas where everything's spread out, this tax suddenly becomes a significant annual cost. For those drivers, the financial case for going electric just evaporated faster than your will to live during a Monday morning commute on the M25. According to the Office for Budget Responsibility, which I'm sure spent ages crunching these numbers on very impressive spreadsheets, the typical EV driver doing 8,500 miles yearly will pay about 255 quid from 2028 onwards. That's supposedly comparable to fuel duty on conventional vehicles, which sounds reasonable until you remember that the whole point of going electric was to save money and help the environment. Now it's just helping the Treasury's balance sheet while making electric cars less appealing.
Here's what's truly baffling about this whole situation. The government has set incredibly ambitious targets for EV adoption. They've banned the sale of new petrol and diesel cars from 2030. That's only 6 years away. 6. And we're currently at 5% adoption. The maths isn't mathing, as the kids say. To hit those targets, we need exponential growth in EV uptake. We need people excited about switching. We need the infrastructure to be brilliant. We need the financial incentives to be compelling. Instead, we're getting a tax that makes the whole proposition less attractive, right when we need momentum most. It's policy-making by contradiction. It's like the government is running 2 completely separate strategies that haven't met in a meeting room and had an awkward conversation about how they're working against each other. One department is screaming, "Go green, save the planet, electric is the future," while another is quietly adding surcharges and making spreadsheets about revenue generation. It's the political equivalent of trying to drive with 1 foot on the accelerator and 1 on the brake. And look, I get it. The Treasury needs money. Roads need maintaining. The government loses fuel duty revenue as people switch to electric. Someone has to pay for infrastructure. I understand the fiscal reality. But timing matters. Strategy matters. You don't introduce barriers right when you're trying to encourage behavior change. That's just basic psychology, let alone basic policy making. What should have happened? A phased approach that waits until EVs represent at least 20 or 30% of the market. Incentives that remain strong until we hit critical mass. A proper plan to fix the charging divide before introducing new costs. Support for lower-income households to access EVs. A functioning second-hand market that makes electric cars achievable for normal people, not just those who can afford to drop 40 grand on a new motor. Instead, we've got this, a tax introduced while adoption is still tiny, while infrastructure is still patchy, while costs are still prohibitive for millions, and while the charging divide means some drivers are already losing money by going electric. It's a masterclass in how to discourage the exact behavior you're supposed to be encouraging. Future policy students will study this as a case study in what not to do. The frustrating part is, electric vehicles genuinely are brilliant when the circumstances are right. If you've got a driveway, can charge at home, and do moderate mileage, they're fantastic. Cheaper to run, better to drive, cleaner for the environment. But that sweet spot doesn't include nearly 40% of UK drivers who lack off-street parking. And now it includes even fewer people because Reeves has decided to add a mileage tax that makes the whole equation less appealing. So where does this leave us? Probably with thousands of drivers who were considering going electric now thinking twice, with existing EV owners feeling mugged, with the automotive industry wondering how they're supposed to hit government targets when the government keeps moving the goalposts, and with Rachel Reeves defending a policy that generates revenue but undermines broader environmental and transportation goals. The conversation around this needs to get louder. EVA England is doing the right thing by pushing back and demanding better. Drivers need to make their voices heard, because if we let this slide without proper scrutiny, it sets a precedent. It tells the government that they can introduce contradictory policies, and we'll just shrug and accept it. And frankly, we deserve better policy making than this. Thanks so much for watching. If you made it this far, you're a legend, and I appreciate you sticking with me through this deep dive into taxation chaos. Let me know in the comments what you think about Rachel Reeves's electric vehicle tax. Are you an EV driver feeling hard done by? Were you considering switching but now thinking twice? Or do you reckon the tax is fair and drivers should contribute? I want to hear your thoughts. Until next time, this has been Brit Article, reminding you that British politics remains the gift that keeps on giving, even when we'd quite like it to stop. Cheers.